Good day. It is the first day of June 2021, the feast day of St. Justin the Martyr, who was a Catholic apologist in the 2nd century AD. And he wrote a lengthy apology, a defense of the faith, to the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who didn't like his apology or his defense, and that's why he's a martyr, okay? Or it's just a beautiful spring day. But in any event, it's beautiful here in Virginia. I hope it's nice where you're at. I hope you had a beautiful and respectful and you really thought about those who fell in combat on Memorial Day. Today, what I'm going to speak about is something that if you are joining certain federal agencies, you have to be aware of. Not all federal agencies, certain federal agencies. And certainly if you're joining the FBI, the DEA, ICE, ATF, and others, you'll sign what's called a mobility agreement. And that means that you are signing an agreement that allows you to be assigned anywhere in the United States that the agency wants to assign you, at least the continental U.S. I've heard that, no, not even the continental U.S., because they can send you to Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii, places like that. They can't send you overseas against your will. Now, what I'm going to speak about is punishments, authorized and unauthorized. And all of us know, certainly should know, and support, the idea that agents who do wrong should be punished. So if an agent commits a crime, certainly they should be prosecuted. Or even if they don't commit a crime, but they commit an offense that is punishable administratively, be it insubordination, misuse of a government car, misconduct with an informant, drunk driving, okay? There are investigations that are done, the case is forwarded to a deciding official, and there are some authorized punishments. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are imposed according to the law, and they are completely supported, and generally, I think they're fairly imposed. What I'm talking about is a punishment that is not in the table of punishments, but is imposed nonetheless. And that is the involuntary transfer. Yes, so let's talk about that. I'm going to show you a little bit, a little screen, or a little slideshow that I put together, and we'll take a look at that, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, and if you, this does not include prosecution. Obviously, if you commit a crime, you're subject to being prosecuted in federal court and state court, depending. But these are for administrative violations. This is all perfectly legal, what I've got right here. And, let's say somebody loses their gun, okay? There's an investigation. It goes to a proposing official. After the investigation is done, it goes to what they call a board of professional conduct. Then they issue a letter to the agent stating, what they think he did or she did, and a proposed punishment. Losing your gun, the punishment is 5 days, okay? That's the going rate. It's set by what they call there's a set of standards without getting into too much technicalities. It's called the Douglas factors, but there's like 20 some odd factors that influence an agent's punishment. So the agent then would receive a proposal, they respond to it, and then the deciding official determines the facts of the case and imposes the punishment. Now that can range anything from an admonition, which is a letter in your file, up to removal, which is firing. Frequently, like again, losing your gun, first time offense. Never happened to me, but I know people that happen to. Suspension without pay for 5 days. If a supervisor misuses his or her position, 14 or above, they can be reduced down to a GS-13. This is not what I'm speaking of. This is all perfectly legal. There's a legal process. There's an appeals process. Nobody pretends that it is anything but a disciplinary action. Now we're going to look at something that is an unauthorized punishment. And it is imposed not for violating the law, not for violating the standards of conduct. It's used nonetheless. Number one, transfer across the United States. Now, they would never do that, right? Yes, they would do that. They would do that. And it's particularly effective for senior agents. Number two, assignment to an undesirable job. Number three, the selective enforcement of policies, rules, and regulations. Now, how do I know that this happens? Because I've seen it happen. Okay. If you displease someone in headquarters, there's no charges that can be brought against the agent, but the agent may find himself, herself transferred across the country. Now, is that lawful? Number one, no, technically it's not lawful. Okay, transferring someone who does wrong does not solve a problem. It moves a problem, if there is a problem, from point A to point B. So transferring somebody from, Boise, Idaho to San Francisco, maybe the person is not productive, let's say, but they never documented it, and so in a case like this, what would happen? A special agent in charge would get on a phone with somebody in headquarters, and suddenly this guy would find, or girl would find, orders transferring them to San Francisco. Now, why would they do that? They suspect or expect that the person will retire. Okay, because it costs $150,000 to $200,000 to transfer somebody. Another thing that they will do is assignment to an undesirable job. Number three, the selective enforcement of policies. And when and where does this occur most often? Well, again, agencies with mobility policies, such as the DEA, agencies that have politically appointed directors or administrators. Again, that's all of them. And for a long time, the DEA didn't have an administrator. We just had actings. But with the new administration, they're appointing political appointees. And it tends to occur most often. It occurred very often under the Clinton administration because we had a man named Tom Constantine who was our director. He had been the administrator or the director of the New York State Police, and he loved to do this when people displeased him. He thought he was J. Edgar Hoover. And then we had another one under George W. Bush, Karen Tandy, and she would do the same thing. She would transfer people who displeased her or displeased a local prosecutor. In Constantine's case, he would move people who displeased local police chiefs because it was cop to cop, and the guy would get transferred. It also occurs when the head of an agency or an SES, a senior executive, is just displeased with an agent. And despite appeals, this practice has been repeatedly upheld by the federal courts. Even when what they are doing is so obvious that Stevie Wonder could see it, it still happens. Now you may ask, has it ever happened to me? Kind of. Yeah, it actually has happened to me. Back in 2001, my son was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I had orders. I was in DEA headquarters, but I had orders to go to El Paso. And my son was being treated at Johns Hopkins, which is in Baltimore. So I put in a hardship request to the career board, and they approved it. They approved my transfer to the Washington Division. Now, the special agent in charge in the Washington Division, whose name I will not mention to protect the guilty, name omitted to protect the guilty, he didn't like me, and he didn't like, he wanted people with the same skin color that he had. Let's just put it that way. And I wasn't one of those people, okay, for supervisors. So he was very displeased when my name was on the teletype. He didn't recommend me, but the career board sent me there, okay? So what he did is he assigned me to a unit that deploys all the time because then I won't be home. He's this is turning around in his mind. How can I hurt this guy? No supervisor wanted this job. No agent wanted the job because you're never home. But nonetheless, we did the job. We did a good job. We actually won the Administrator's Award for our deployment to Harrisonburg. His next move then was to transfer me to a task force which is located about 70 miles from my house, which is in Stafford, Virginia. The task force was halfway to Baltimore. It was way up in near Baltimore. We figured he'll never take this. He'll go back to headquarters and I can get who I want. No, I did it for 5 years. He retired, and at the retirement, he looked at me and goes, "Some of you can't wait till I leave, right, Jim?" And I said, "You're absolutely right, but hey, we're buddies. It's just all business, right?" We would always argue, and then we get back. It's all business, so. And this selective enforcement of policies, some of it can be comical almost. In Greenbelt, I had a $15,000 flash roll or money that we kept in the safe, and that's used to buy drugs and pay informants. And obviously, you don't want to drive into D.C. all the time, and it's kept in my safe. But every month, I'd be audited. And one month, I was $1 short. And the cashier picked up the phone because she was one of this guy's allies, called him. He called internal affairs on me for being $1 short. And they laughed about it. He said, he's a lunatic. I said, I know he is. I mean, but I got to work for him, I said, if you're going to steal, at least steal a lot of money. Don't steal $1, This is what you have to put up with, though. So if you're signing up for the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, ICE, and you displease it, the rule is don't tick anybody off. And if you do, pretend that you hate where you're at. How's that? Because then they'll keep you there. But otherwise, you will be subject to there's authorized and unauthorized sanctions. There's sanctions that people will apply when they're just not happy with you. And again, I'm going to put a case in the comment section where agents were doing the bad thing in training. They were telling bad jokes and things that they shouldn't have been telling. But instead of punishing them, the administrator, who was then Tom Constantine, sent them across the country in the hopes that they would quit or retire or whatever. It was appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals and found to be consistent with his power as administrator. So again, it's not poor me, it's just poor you guys, because if you're joining these agencies, you have to be aware that that this is out there, that it's a possibility. And so I hate to start your week on something so negative, but it is it is something you should be aware of. Okay, going into these agencies, you might be in a job for 15 years, you love it, you don't want a promotion, but you upset somebody, and you didn't know that you upset them even. They just made a phone call to DEA headquarters. Next thing you see them, what the hell is this? I'm going to, Los Angeles. I don't want to go to, I don't know who sent him to Los Angeles. Who knows? You've been there 15 years. You're due for a transfer to broaden your career prospects. So they do it. I hate to say they do it, but they do it. So I hope you got something out of it. If you didn't, you're probably joining another agency, but again, you should know the good points and the bad points, and this is one of the bad points of those agencies. Okay, have a good day.